Imagine that one morning, something impossible happens. You suddenly begin to shrink. You become smaller than a grain of rice, smaller than a speck of dust, and finally so tiny that no human eye can see you. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, you enter the human body. From the outside, the human body looks simple. We see skin, eyes, hair, hands, legs, and a face. But inside, there is an enormous living world. Trillions of cells are working every second. The heart is pumping. The lungs are exchanging gases. The brain is sending electrical signals. The stomach is digesting food. The kidneys are filtering blood, and the immune system is searching for dangerous microorganisms. Your journey begins inside the mouth of a person who is eating breakfast. A small piece of bread enters the mouth. Immediately, the teeth begin to cut and crush it into smaller pieces. The front teeth cut the food, while the back teeth grind it. But the teeth are not working alone. Saliva begins to mix with the food. Saliva is produced by the salivary glands. It makes food soft and easier to swallow. But saliva also contains an enzyme called amylase. This enzyme begins to break down starch into smaller sugar molecules. You're surprised. You always thought digestion happened only in the stomach, but now you discover that digestion actually begins in the mouth. The tongue moves the food around, mixes it with saliva, and forms it into a soft ball called a bolus. Then the tongue pushes it toward the back of the throat. At this moment, the body faces an important problem. Air and food pass through the same general region of the throat, but air must enter the trachea and reach the lungs, while food must enter the esophagus and reach the stomach. How does the body stop food from entering the lungs? A small flap, called the epiglottis, moves over the entrance of the trachea when the person swallows. It helps direct food into the esophagus. The food enters the esophagus. You follow it. The esophagus is not just a simple tube. Its muscular walls contract in waves. One part contracts, then another, pushing the food downward. This wave-like movement is called peristalsis. Even if a person swallowed food while lying down, peristalsis could still help move it toward the stomach. Soon, you arrive inside the stomach. It feels like entering a biological chemical laboratory. The muscular walls of the stomach move and mix the food. Gastric glands release hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes. Hydrochloric acid creates a strongly acidic environment. This helps kill many microorganisms that may have entered with food. It also helps digestive enzymes function properly. One important enzyme is pepsin. Pepsin begins breaking large protein molecules into smaller chains of amino acids. You look around and wonder, if the stomach contains such strong acid, why does it not digest itself? Then you notice a protective layer covering the stomach wall. The stomach produces mucus, which forms a barrier between the acidic contents and the stomach cells. The stomach lining also replaces damaged cells quickly. The body does not simply create powerful chemicals. It also creates protection against them. After some time, the food becomes a thick, semi-liquid mixture called chyme. Small amounts of this mixture pass from the stomach into the small intestine. You follow. The small intestine is one of the most important parts of digestion. Here, several organs work together. The liver produces bile. Bile is stored in the gallbladder until it is needed. When fatty food enters the small intestine, bile is released. Bile does not directly digest fat with enzymes. Instead, it breaks large fat droplets into smaller droplets. This process is called emulsification. It increases the surface area available for digestive enzymes. The pancreas also releases digestive substances into the small intestine. Pancreatic enzymes help break carbohydrates into simple sugars, proteins into amino acids, and fats into fatty acids and glycerol. Gradually, the food is reduced to very small molecules that can be absorbed. You move closer to the wall of the small intestine and see thousands of tiny finger-like structures. They're called villi. Each villus contains blood capillaries, and many also contain a lymph vessel called a lacteal. The surface of each villus contains even smaller structures called microvilli. Together, villi and microvilli greatly increase the surface area for absorption. Glucose and amino acids pass into the blood. Many products of fat digestion enter the lymphatic system first. You decide to travel with a glucose molecule. You enter the bloodstream. The bloodstream is like a huge transport network. Blood may look like a simple red liquid, but it is actually made of several important components. The liquid part is called plasma. Plasma carries nutrients, hormones, carbon dioxide, urea, proteins, salts, and many other substances. Floating inside the plasma are red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. You notice millions of red blood cells moving through the vessel. They have a special biconcave shape, meaning they are thinner in the middle and thicker around the edges. This shape provides a large surface area for gas exchange. Red blood cells contain hemoglobin. Hemoglobin can bind with oxygen. Unlike many other cells, mature human red blood cells do not have a nucleus. This creates more space for hemoglobin. You continue moving with the blood. Suddenly, you hear a powerful sound. Thump, thump, thump. You are approaching the heart. The human heart is only about the size of a fist, but it works continuously throughout life. It is a muscular pump divided into 4 chambers. The upper chambers are the right atrium and left atrium. The lower chambers are the right ventricle and left ventricle. Blood returning from most of the body has relatively little oxygen and more carbon dioxide. It enters the right atrium through large veins. The blood then passes into the right ventricle. The right ventricle contracts and pumps the blood toward the lungs through the pulmonary artery. You travel with it. Soon, you go to the lungs. The airways branch again and again, becoming smaller. Eventually, you reach millions of microscopic air sacs called alveoli. The alveoli look like tiny balloons. Their walls are extremely thin and are surrounded by networks of capillaries. When the person breathes in, oxygen enters the lungs and reaches the alveoli. The oxygen concentration is higher inside the alveoli than in the deoxygenated blood arriving at the lungs. Therefore, oxygen moves across the thin walls and enters the blood by diffusion. At the same time, carbon dioxide moves from the blood into the alveoli. When the person breathes out, much of this carbon dioxide leaves the body. An oxygen molecule enters a red blood cell and attaches to hemoglobin. The blood now contains more oxygen. It travels through the pulmonary veins back to the heart. This time, it enters the left atrium. From there, it moves into the left ventricle. You notice that the wall of the left ventricle is much thicker than the wall of the right ventricle. There's a reason. The right ventricle only needs to pump blood to the nearby lungs. The left ventricle must generate enough pressure to send blood throughout almost the entire body. The left ventricle contracts powerfully. Blood rushes into the aorta, the largest artery in the body. From there, arteries divide into smaller arteries and eventually into tiny capillaries. You travel toward a muscle cell. The glucose molecule that entered from the intestine and the oxygen molecule that entered from the lungs finally arrive near the same cell. You pass through the capillary wall and enter the surrounding tissue. Now you are about to enter one of the basic units of the human body, a cell. The cell membrane surrounds a cell. It is not simply a wall. It controls the movement of substances into and out of the cell. Inside, you see many structures called organelles. One of the most important is the nucleus. Inside the nucleus is DNA. DNA is like an enormous biological instruction system. Sections of DNA, called genes, contain instructions for making proteins. Proteins are essential for life. Some form structures. Some act as receptors. Some transport substances. Others work as enzymes that control chemical reactions. When a cell needs a particular protein, information from DNA is copied into a molecule called messenger RNA. Messenger RNA travels to structures called ribosomes. The ribosomes read the information and join amino acids together in the correct order. A protein is produced, but cells also need energy. You notice bean-shaped organelles called mitochondria. Mitochondria are often called the powerhouses of the cell because they are major sites of aerobic respiration. Glucose reacts with oxygen through a series of controlled chemical reactions. The overall process releases energy. Much of the usable energy is transferred into a molecule called ADP. ADP acts like an immediate energy currency for cells. Muscle contraction needs ADP. Active transport needs ADP. Protein synthesis needs energy. Cell division needs energy. Even the continuous activity of the brain depends on energy supplied by cellular respiration. The muscle cell uses ADP and contracts. You suddenly realize something important. When a person walks, runs, smiles, writes, or even breathes, billions of microscopic cellular processes must work together. You leave the muscle and travel toward the brain. The skull appears like a huge protective fortress. Inside, it is one of the most complex biological structures known, the human brain. The brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, together with many supporting cells called glial cells. You move close to a neuron. The neuron has branching structures called dendrites that receive information. Its long extension is called an axon. Suddenly, an electrical signal travels along the axon. This electrical event is called an action potential. At the end of the neuron, the electrical signal causes chemical messengers called neurotransmitters to be released. The tiny gap between one neuron and another is called a synapse. Neurotransmitters move across the synaptic gap and bind to receptors on the next cell. In this way, information travels through networks of neurons. These networks allow the person to think, move, remember, speak, learn, feel emotions, and respond to the environment. At that moment, the person's finger accidentally touches something very hot. Receptors in the skin detect the dangerous temperature. A sensory neuron rapidly carries an electrical signal toward the spinal cord. The signal enters the spinal cord. Before the brain has fully processed what happened, another neuron sends a signal toward the muscles. The muscles contract. The hand moves away. Only moments later does the brain clearly recognize the pain. This rapid automatic response is called a reflex action. A reflex can protect the body from injury because it can happen faster than a deliberate decision. You travel to the person's eye. Light from his surroundings enters through the transparent cornea. It passes through the pupil. The iris controls the size of the pupil and therefore helps regulate how much light enters. The light then passes through the lens. The lens changes shape to help focus light onto the retina. The retina contains photoreceptor cells. Two important types are rods and cones. Rods are especially useful in dim light. Cones are important for color vision and detailed vision. These photoreceptors convert light into electrical signals. The signals travel along the optic nerve to the brain. The brain processes the information and produces our visual experience of the world. In other words, the eyes collect light information, but seeing depends heavily on the brain. You move to the ear. Sound waves enter the ear canal and strike the eardrum. The eardrum vibrates. These vibrations are transferred through three tiny bones in the middle ear: the malleus, incus, and stapes. The vibrations then enter the inner ear and reach a fluid-filled structure called the cochlea. Inside the cochlea are specialized sensory cells called hair cells. Movement of fluid bends these cells and creates nerve signals. The signals travel to the brain, where they are interpreted as sound. The inner ear also helps the body maintain balance. You begin to understand that the brain constantly receives information from many different sensory systems and combines it into one coordinated experience. Now you travel to the skin. At first, skin looks like a simple covering, but it is actually an organ with several functions. It protects the body from physical damage and many microorganisms. It reduces excessive water loss. It contains sensory receptors. It also helps regulate body temperature. When the body becomes too hot, blood vessels near the skin may widen. This increases blood flow near the surface, allowing more heat to escape. Sweat glands also produce sweat. When sweat evaporates, it removes heat from the skin. When the body becomes too cold, blood vessels near the skin can narrow, reducing heat loss. Skeletal muscles may also begin to contract rapidly. We call this shivering. Shivering produces heat. The body is constantly trying to maintain a relatively stable internal environment. This process is called homeostasis. Temperature is not the only thing controlled by homeostasis. Blood glucose level, water balance, ion concentration, blood pressure, pH, and many other conditions must remain within suitable ranges. The endocrine system plays an important role in this regulation. You travel to the pancreas. After a meal, blood glucose levels rise. Special cells in the pancreas detect the increase and release a hormone called insulin. Insulin helps body cells take up glucose and encourages the storage of excess glucose as glycogen, especially in the liver and muscles. As blood glucose falls toward a normal level, insulin secretion decreases. If blood glucose becomes too low, another pancreatic hormone called glucagon helps increase it. This is an example of negative feedback. Negative feedback occurs when the body detects a change and activates mechanisms that reverse that change. You now visit the kidneys. Blood flows into them continuously. Inside each kidney are roughly 1 million microscopic filtering units called nephrons. You enter one. Blood arrives at a cluster of small capillaries called the glomerulus. Pressure forces water and many small dissolved substances out of the blood. However, blood cells and most large proteins normally remain in the bloodstream. The filtered liquid then moves along the nephron. The body cannot simply throw all of it away. Useful substances are selectively reabsorbed. Nearly all healthy glucose is normally reabsorbed. Required amounts of water and ions are also returned to the blood. Excess substances and waste products remain. Eventually, urine is formed. The urine travels through the ureters to the bladder, where it is stored until it leaves the body through the urethra. The kidneys, therefore, do much more than make urine. They help regulate water balance, electrolyte levels, acid-base balance, and blood pressure. You continue toward the liver. The liver is another enormous chemical processing organ. Nutrients absorbed from the digestive system often travel to the liver before reaching the rest of the body. The liver stores glycogen. It processes nutrients. It helps remove or modify toxic substances. It produces bile. It makes many important blood proteins. It also converts toxic ammonia, produced during the breakdown of amino acids, into urea. Urea then travels through the blood to the kidneys and is removed in urine. Suddenly, alarms seem to go off around you. A harmful bacterium has entered through a small cut in the skin. The body's immune system responds. White blood cells begin moving toward the area. Some cells can engulf microorganisms in a process called phagocytosis. Others help coordinate immune responses. B lymphocytes can produce antibodies. Antibodies have specific shapes that allow them to recognize particular antigens. T lymphocytes perform several functions, including helping control immune responses and destroying certain infected cells. The immune system also forms memory cells after many infections or vaccinations. These memory cells allow the body to respond faster if the same pathogen appears again. This is one of the scientific principles behind vaccination. A vaccine exposes the immune system to a harmless form, weakened form, inactivated part, or specific component of a pathogen, depending on the vaccine. The immune system learns to recognize the target without the person having to suffer the full disease. Later, if the real pathogen enters, the immune response may begin more quickly and effectively. While watching the immune system work, you notice platelets gathering around the cut. Blood vessels have been damaged. Platelets stick to the damaged region and participate in a chain of reactions that forms a blood clot. A protein network containing fibrin helps stabilize the clot. The clot reduces blood loss and creates a temporary barrier while damaged tissue begins to repair itself. Nearby cells start dividing. You watch one cell prepare for mitosis. Before division, its DNA has already been copied. The chromosomes condense. They line up. The duplicated genetic material is separated. The cell finally divides into two daughter cells. Cell division is essential for growth, tissue maintenance, and repair. But cell division must be carefully controlled. If mutations damage genes that regulate cell growth and division, cells can sometimes begin dividing abnormally. Over time, uncontrolled growth may contribute to cancer. The body has many protective mechanisms to detect DNA damage and abnormal cells, but these systems are not perfect. You then think about where the entire human body started. Every adult was once a single cell. When a sperm cell fertilizes an egg cell, a zygote is formed. This single cell contains genetic information from both biological parents. The zygote divides again and again. One cell becomes two. Two become four. Four become eight. Eventually, large numbers of cells are produced. But something remarkable also happens. Not every cell remains identical in function. Different genes become more or less active in different cells. Cells begin to specialize. Some become neurons. Some become muscle cells. Some become skin cells. Some become blood cells. Some become part of the liver, lungs, heart, kidneys, or bones. As development continues, tissues form. Groups of tissues form organs. Organs work together in organ systems. Eventually, the body becomes an integrated organism. You visit the skeleton. Bones may look dead and hard, but living bone is dynamic tissue. Bone contains cells, blood vessels, nerves, minerals, and proteins. Calcium compounds give bone much of its hardness, while collagen helps provide flexibility. Bones support the body and protect organs. The skull protects the brain. The rib cage protects the heart and lungs. The vertebral column protects the spinal cord. Bones also work with muscles to produce movement. At joints, muscles are attached to bones by tendons. When a muscle contracts, it pulls on a bone. Because muscles can pull but cannot push, many skeletal muscles work in antagonistic pairs. For example, to bend and straighten the arm, the biceps and triceps perform opposite actions. The skeleton also has another important role. Inside certain bones is bone marrow. Bone marrow produces many blood cells. New red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets arise from stem cells in the marrow. You return to the chest and watch breathing more carefully. The diaphragm, a dome-shaped muscle below the lungs, contracts. It moves downward. The chest cavity becomes larger. Pressure inside the lungs decreases. Air moves in. When the diaphragm relaxes, it moves upward. The volume of the chest cavity decreases, helping push air out. Breathing and cellular respiration are related but not identical. Breathing is the physical movement of air into and out of the lungs. Cellular respiration is the chemical process inside cells that releases usable energy from nutrients. You follow oxygen once more. It enters the lungs, moves into the blood, binds to hemoglobin, travels to a cell, enters the mitochondria, participates in aerobic respiration. The energy released is transferred into ADP. Then the cell uses ADP to perform work. Everything is connected. Food provides raw materials and energy. The digestive system breaks food down. The respiratory system supplies oxygen. The circulatory system transports substances. The kidneys remove wastes and regulate internal conditions. The liver processes chemicals. The nervous system sends rapid signals. The endocrine system uses hormones for slower, longer-lasting communication. The immune system protects against pathogens. The skeleton gives support. Muscles produce movement. The skin protects the body. The reproductive system makes continuation of the species possible. No major system truly works alone. Suddenly, the person begins running. The body immediately changes. Muscle cells need more ADP. Cellular respiration increases. More oxygen is required. More carbon dioxide is produced. The breathing rate rises. Breathing becomes deeper. The heart beats faster. More blood is delivered to active muscles. Body temperature rises. Sweat production increases. Blood flow near the skin changes to help release heat. Stored fuels are mobilized. The nervous and endocrine systems coordinate many of these responses. The person does not need to consciously command each cell. The body automatically adjusts. After some time, the person stops running. The demand for energy decreases. Breathing gradually slows. Heart rate moves closer to its resting level. Temperature returns toward normal. Homeostasis is restored. Hours later, night arrives. The person goes to sleep. You assume the body will finally stop working, but it does not. The heart continues beating. The lungs continue breathing. The kidneys continue filtering blood. The liver continues processing chemicals. The immune system continues monitoring tissues. The brain remains active. Sleep itself is an active biological state. During different stages of sleep, brain activity changes. Sleep supports memory, learning, hormone regulation, immune function, and many other processes. The person's eyes close, but inside the body, trillions of cells continue their work. You float through the bloodstream one final time. You realize that there is no single control room responsible for everything. Instead, the human body works through coordination. Cells communicate with chemicals. Neurons communicate with electrical and chemical signals. Hormones travel through blood. Organs exchange substances. Feedback systems detect changes. Genes provide instructions. Proteins perform countless tasks. Energy constantly changes form. Matter enters the body, is transformed, used, stored, and eventually removed. Even a simple action, such as lifting a glass of water, requires many systems. The eyes locate the glass. The brain processes its position. Motor regions of the brain prepare movement. Signals travel through the spinal cord and nerves. Muscles contract. Bones move at joints. The heart supplies blood. The lungs supply oxygen. Cells generate ADP. Sensory receptors report the position of the hand. The brain constantly makes corrections. The hand reaches the glass. What appears to be one simple movement is actually the result of millions of coordinated biological events. Finally, the same mysterious force that brought you inside begins pulling you outward. You travel through the bloodstream, past the beating heart, and suddenly find yourself back outside the body. You slowly return to your normal size. Everything around you looks ordinary again. A person is sitting in front of you, breathing quietly. Nothing seems dramatic, but now you know what is happening beneath the skin. Every heartbeat sends blood through thousands of kilometers of vessels. Every breath brings oxygen to cells. Every meal supplies molecules that can become energy or body tissue. Every thought depends on networks of neurons. Every movement depends on muscles, nerves, bones, circulation, respiration, and cellular energy. Every second, damaged molecules are repaired, old cells die. New cells form, chemicals are balanced, pathogens are challenged, and countless signals travel from one part of the body to another. The human body is not a machine in the ordinary sense. It is a living, changing, self-regulating biological system made from trillions of cooperating cells. And perhaps the most amazing fact is that most of this happens without us even noticing. While we talk, laugh, study, eat, sleep, dream, or simply sit quietly, an extraordinary scientific world continues working inside us. Every second, every minute, every day, from our first cell to our final heartbeat,